I'm proud of the work my team did, and I appreciate the opportunity to appear here today to correct false and misleading narratives about our work. During my tenure as special counsel, we followed Justice Department policies, we observed legal requirements, and took actions based on the facts and the law. I made my decisions without regard to President Trump's political association, activities, beliefs, or candidacy in the 2024 election. President Trump was charged because the evidence established that he willfully broke the law, the very laws he took an oath to uphold. Grand juries in 2 separate districts reached this conclusion based on his actions, as alleged in the indictments they returned. Rather than accept his defeat in the 2020 election, President Trump engaged in a criminal scheme to overturn the results and prevent the lawful transfer of power. After leaving office in January of 21, President Trump illegally kept classified documents at his Mar-a-Lago social club and repeatedly tried to obstruct justice to conceal his continued retention of those documents. Highly sensitive national security information was held in a ballroom and a bathroom. As I testify before the committee today, I want to be clear. I stand by my decisions as special counsel, including the decision to bring charges against President Trump. Our investigation developed proof beyond a reasonable doubt that President Trump engaged in criminal activity. If asked whether to prosecute a former president based on the same facts today, I would do so regardless of whether that president was a Democrat or a Republican. No one should be above the law in this country, and the law required that he be held to account, so that is what I did. To have done otherwise on the facts of these cases would have been to shirk my duties as a prosecutor and as a public servant, of which I had no intention of doing. I remain grateful for the counsel, judgment, and advice of my team. President Trump has sought to seek revenge against career prosecutors, FBI agents, and support staff simply for having worked on these cases. To vilify and seek retribution against these people is wrong. Those dedicated public servants are the best of us, and it has been a privilege to serve with them. After nearly 30 years of public service, including in international settings, I have seen how the rule of law can erode. My fear is that we have seen the rule of law function in our country for so long that many of us have come to take it for granted. The rule of law is not self-executing. It depends on our collective commitment to apply it. It requires dedicated service on behalf of others, especially when that service is difficult and comes with costs. Our willingness to pay those costs is what tests and defines our commitment to the rule of law and to this wonderful country. Thank you.
The subpoenas that we secured with non-disclosure orders from a judge because I had grave concerns about obstruction of justice in this investigation, specifically with regards to Donald Trump. Not only did we have the obstruction of justice that we were investigating in the classified documents case, but I was aware during the course of our investigation of targeting of witnesses. During the course of the conspiracy itself, there were election workers who had their lives turned upside down and received vile death threats because they were targeted by Donald Trump and his co-conspirators. I had a duty to protect witnesses in this investigation. That risk, that threat to witnesses was only confirmed when Donald Trump suggested that one witness should be put to death and then also issued a statement, if you come after me, I'm coming after you. In my mind, I can't think of a more direct threat to witnesses and individuals involved in that proceeding. Our investigation revealed that Donald Trump was not looking for honest answers about whether there was fraud in the election. He was looking for ways to stay in power. And when people told him things that conflicted with him staying in power, he rejected them, or he chose not even to contact people like that who would know if the election was done properly in the state. On the other hand, when individuals would say things that would allow him to stay in power no matter how fantastical, he would latch on to those. That pattern, over time, we felt was powerful evidence that he, in fact, knew that the fraud claims he was making were false. And just conclude saying we felt that constituted powerful evidence of the knowing falsity of his statements in furtherance of the fraud.
I want to focus on something my colleagues across the aisle seem to want to ignore. The fact that your investigation into President Trump's attempt to overturn the 2020 election was built on testimony from members of the Republican Party. In fact, last week, the New York Times published grand jury transcripts from Georgia that show the same pattern in Trump's Georgia criminal case. Georgia's Republican Attorney General Chris Carr testified that he told, quote, and this is a quote, "We're just not seeing the things that you are seeing." And the late Georgia House Speaker David Ralston, also a Republican, testified that Trump's fake elector scheme was, quote, "the craziest thing I've heard." And then there's Senator Lindsey Graham, one of the president's closest allies. In his secret grand jury testimony, Senator Graham told the jurors, quote, "I have told him more times than we can count that he fell short," unquote. And then he said this, quote, "If you told him Martians came and stole votes, he'd be inclined to believe it." Martians, that's from Senator Graham speaking under oath. So here's my question. Mr. Smith, in your deposition with this committee, you testified, and here's a quote, "Our case was built on, frankly, Republicans who put their allegiance to the country before the party." That the president's closest allies are telling him that his claims of election fraud are wrong. And so I'm just wondering, can you explain what you meant in your deposition that it was Republicans who were putting their allegiance to their country ahead of their party?
Yes. There were witnesses who I felt would be very strong witnesses, including, for example, the Secretary of State in Georgia, who told Donald Trump the truth, told him things that he did not want to hear, and put him on notice that what he was saying was false. These were people who knew how the elections were conducted in these states, and I believe that witnesses of that nature, witnesses who are willing to tell the truth, even if it's going to impose a cost on them in their lives, my experience as a prosecutor over 30 years is that witnesses like that are very credible, and that jurors tend to believe witnesses like that because they pay a cost for telling the truth.
In terms of the grand jury testimony that's now been released, the fact that Donald Trump, according to Senator Graham, would believe that Martians stole the election, what does that tell you about Trump's state of mind?
That statement is consistent with what we found in our investigation, in that our investigation revealed that Donald Trump was not looking for honest answers about whether there was fraud in the election. He was looking for ways to stay in power. And when people told him things that conflicted with him staying in power, he rejected them, or he chose not even to contact people like that who would know if the election was done properly in the state. On the other hand, when individuals would say things that would allow him to stay in power no matter how fantastical, he would latch on to those. That pattern, over time, we felt was powerful evidence that he, in fact, knew that the fraud claims he was making were false.
You know, who were some of the Republican witnesses who told you that who told President Trump that his claims of election fraud were false? Can you share that with us?
There were a range of witnesses. They ranged from people on his campaign team who had wanted him to win, were employed to help him win the election. They included state officials, state Republican officials who wanted him to win, voted for him, campaigned for him, asked him and his co-conspirators to provide evidence to support their claims, and invariably they never did. It included officials, advisors, people he worked with in the White House who he relied upon for important decisions and who he trusted in other contexts. We felt we had strong evidence from a variety of sources.
Time of the gentlelady has expired.
Mr. Chairman, my fellow Californian, you were allowing the witness.
Yeah, it's a good question. Isn't that grounds to let him answer?
I've given him 30 seconds extra, the gentlelady 30 seconds extra. If the gentleman can be concise and finish up here quickly, we will allow him to finish.
Yes, sir. And just conclude saying we felt that constituted powerful evidence of the knowing falsity of his statements in furtherance of the fraud.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to yield back, noting the presence of officers who were severely attacked.
Got nothing to yield back. You're a minute over. The gentleman from
protecting
Texas.
our lives on January 6th.
The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gill, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Is in this same call, President Trump repeatedly raised fraud claims, and the Secretary of State repeatedly explained not only that they weren't true, but in several instances explained why they weren't true. And that call ended with President Trump threatening the Secretary of State that he might be a target for criminal prosecution if he didn't do what President Trump wanted him to do.
So see, that raises a very critical point. President Trump didn't just spread lies about the election. In your words, and I'm quoting, he preyed on, end quote, Republican officials in Georgia and other states who believed would help him. Mr. Smith, Donald Trump thought these officials would break the law out of party loyalty. And when those officials, his own political allies, told him the truth, he dismissed them and continued to spread the lies anyway. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Trump has a playbook for how he handles people who try to hold him accountable. In August 2023, right after your office indicted him, President Trump shared that playbook on social media for everyone to see. He wrote, "If you go after me, I'm coming for you." Trump has said that you, Mr. Smith, should be investigated and put in prison. He called you a disgrace to humanity, a radical left Marxist, a criminal. In fact, Trump has used the words deranged Jack Smith 185 times on Truth Social.
The statements are meant to intimidate me. I will not be intimidated. We did our work pursuant to department policy. We followed the facts and we followed the law, and that process resulted in proof beyond a reasonable doubt that he committed serious crimes. I'm not going to pretend that didn't happen because he's threatening me.
I asked unanimous consent to enter into the record a tweet from Representative Biggs on January 7th, 2021, in which he said, quote, "Yesterday, criminal rioters hijacked a joint session of Congress."
Objection. Without objection.
And the second one is a unanimous consent to enter into the record an interview from March 2024 on the Capitol Hill show, in which you called on those who attacked the Capitol on January 6th to be, quote, held accountable because, quote, that's the way our system does work and should work.
Without objection.
Thank you very much. Thank you
now
very
recognize
much.
the gentleman from Texas.
And did your investigation find any of the rioters trying to use Trump's words and calls to action as a defense in the criminal cases against them?
We cited a number of rioters who admitted that they had committed their crimes at the behest and in the name of Donald Trump.
Even the lawyer for Jacob Chansley, also known as the Q-Anon Shaman, highlighted that his words, how the words affected his client. He heard the words of the president, he believed them, he genuinely believed them, and he thought that the president was actually going to walk with them to the Capitol. Do you believe that Donald Trump motivated and was responsible for the violence that occurred on that day, even if he didn't walk with them to the Capitol?
Yes, he was the person most responsible for what happened at the Capitol, and that he caused what happened at the Capitol, and that it was foreseeable to him.
The entire purpose of the Republican Party, unfortunately, has become to help criminals and corporate interests evade accountability. Republicans want impunity, not accountability. They want impunity for the January 6th people, for the classified documents case, for the Epstein files, for billionaires and big corporations, and for terror that DHS is sowing on our streets. The Gestapo tactics by ICE and CBP are the obvious result of President Trump and the Republican Party that protect anyone who helps them turn our country into an authoritarian gangster state. Whether it's storming the Capitol to overthrow an election or murdering people in broad daylight, Republicans will back you if you back their political mafia and racketeering operation. There's no clearer example than that of the blanket pardon of nearly 1,600 insurrectionists on day one of this disgraceful presidency. Trump pardoned people convicted of seditious conspiracy, who brutalized police officers, and who wanted to kill Vice President Pence. People who've committed more crimes since the insurrection: sexual assault, child molestation, aggravated kidnapping. That's who Trump pardoned, and that's whose side Republicans are on.
I do not understand why you would mass pardon people who assaulted police officers. I don't get it. I never will.
That's exactly right. And none of this is a coincidence. The entire purpose of the Republican Party, unfortunately, has become to help criminals and corporate interests evade accountability. Republicans want impunity, not accountability.
This is Trump's playbook at work. Complain loudly, gin up hatred and resentment, then express a hope that somebody will do something, but never explicitly order anyone to act, and then watch as his followers and loyalists go after their targets. This is what happened on January 6th. Trump stood at the ellipse and gave a campaign speech to his supporters, and he said, if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. And I think it's clear that his intimidation will stop at nothing.
I want to now shift to these allegations from my Republican colleagues about the collection of phone records of Republican senators. I guess some of the ones that were trying to get $500,000 of taxpayer dollars. What do you say to those who claim you chose to target Republicans because you only collected phone records for Republicans?
The conspiracy I was investigating targeted Republicans. I could just add one thing. We interviewed Rudy Giuliani in the course of this investigation, and we asked him, why did you, in one of the voicemails he left for the senator, mention the fact that it was Republicans that you were reaching out to? And he said, because the Democrats weren't going to help us, and even some Republicans wouldn't help us. And so our evidence shows repeatedly that the plan was to see if you could prey on people's party loyalty.
Some of the gentlelady's expired.
So why is it legally important to know that Trump knew he was lying when he said the election was stolen?
That was part of our proof at trial, and it was relevant to the charges, specifically to the first charge, to defraud the United States. It is permissible for someone to lie, but when they use speech to commit a crime, to facilitate a crime, that is not protected by the First Amendment. The Supreme Court has been very clear on that, and this very issue was litigated in the case. The defense raised this very issue. And one thing I want to be clear about today, the case that I investigated and the case we had, it was built to be tried in a courtroom, not in the media. Our case was built to withstand the crucible of litigation, and our assessment was that we had proof beyond a reasonable doubt that would do that.
So, Mr. Smith, what evidence did you develop to suggest Trump knew he had lost the 2020 election?
We had evidence from a variety of sources, evidence from people who were close to Donald Trump and who he relied on, people who wanted him to win the election, people who were employed by his campaign to help him win the election. Our evidence is that this was a conspiracy and that Donald Trump specifically sought to prey on party loyalty. Our investigation involved interviewing and subpoenaing records of Republicans because that's who Donald Trump sought to prey on to stay in office. And the reality is certain people refused to do that. The vice president refused to go along with that. People in various states' legislatures refused to go along with that.
These are the guys who created the Weaponization Committee for the DOJ. So let's talk about the present. Jerome Powell facing investigation. Mark Kelly, United States Senator, under investigation. Adam Schiff, United States Senator, under investigation. Eric Swalwell, United States Representative, under investigation. Chris Christie, potentially under investigation. Jack Smith, oh, that's you, under investigation. Miles Taylor, I could keep going. Any questions about any of that? We know you don't.
Will the gentleman yield for a question?
I will, please.
Because you have a way of synthesizing that nobody else does, Mr. Moskowitz. Listening to our colleagues today, I wonder if they actually believe any of this would have happened had Donald Trump simply accepted the results of the election.
You mean like Al Gore did when he lost 5-4 at the Supreme Court?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would any of this, would the violence have happened? Would the fake counterfeit slates have happened?
No,
the threats against Vice President Pence?
No, none of it would have happened. And I have like 4 more pages of the weaponization of the Department
Time
of
of the
Justice.
gentleman.
And he said the same thing in the subcommittee the other week, that it wasn't President Trump that inspired January 6th, right? It wasn't him. He said in the subcommittee that it was actually Ray Epps. Ray Epps. He was the one who told people to break the law and the windows and the doors and to beat police officers and hang Mike Pence and try to break into the floor of the House and wiping feces on the walls. It was all this guy, Ray Epps, right? So who is Ray Epps? Why is he so powerful? So, I mean, I just did a quick, Google search of Ray Epps, and his Wikipedia page says the powerful Ray Epps is a wedding planner to the Oath Keepers. This is the wedding planner? That's the mastermind of January. You went from Donald Trump. It wasn't Donald. Who are we going to blame? Who could it be? How about the wedding planner to the Oath Keepers? I mean, it's just pathetic.
What I heard you say is that when you lie, and you know you're lying, and then you act on that lie to overturn the democratic process, that is a felony.
Mr. Smith, did you ever speak to President Biden about this case?
Never.
Did you ever receive orders or direction from President Biden or anyone else in the White House about this case?
No.
Did you ever receive any direction from the Attorney General Merrick Garland regarding how you should, whether or not you should charge this case?
No, I was given the independence to make that decision on my own.
An independent special counsel, exactly. I just want to point out to my colleagues who seem to think this is a politicized investigation that on February 10th, over a month, 2021, over a month after January 6th, Marco Rubio said the January 6th attack on the Capitol was far more dangerous than most realize, and we have a criminal justice system in place to address it. Specifically, who gave evidence to you that supported your conclusion that he knew that he was lying?
That came from a number of sources. It came from staff in the White House who talked to him and told him that his fraud claims were not true. It came from staff on his campaign who told him that. It came from members of the Department of Justice. It came from state officials who, when he tried to press them to do things in contravention of their oath, they refused to. They asked him for evidence and his co-conspirators, and they never provided it. Over and over again, the people who were best situated to know how the elections were conducted in these states, he either avoided contacting them or disregarded the clear debunkings that were provided to him.
Here are some quotes, because I heard one of my colleagues call you a hypocrite. Here are some quotes from my colleagues. Chairman Jordan, right after January 6th, stop the violence, support Capitol Police. Ted Cruz, those storming the Capitol need to stop right now. The Constitution protects but not violence. Chip Roy, today the People's House was attacked, which is an attack on the Republic itself. Steve Scalise, United States Capitol Police saved my life. Lindsey Graham, when it comes to accountability, the president needs to understand his actions were the problem. Darrell Issa, the violence and turmoil we witnessed in Washington, D.C. was completely unacceptable. And former Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, whose name we heard a lot today, what did he have to say about it? Let me be clear. Last week's violence attack on the Capitol was undemocratic, un-American, and criminal. And make no mistake, those who were responsible should be brought to justice. The president bears responsibility. Period. Or exclamation point.
I don't know why we're acting surprised that a man who had close to 90 allegations out of 4 different jurisdictions and ultimately ended up with 34 convictions would possibly be committing a criminal act on January 6th. And now he is violating people's due process rights. He is ignoring court orders. He's starting wars without congressional authority in contradiction to the Constitution. He's enriching himself to the tune of over $1.4 billion. He's shaking down electeds to draw maps that will help him stay in power because the Republicans don't understand that they swore an oath to the Constitution and that we are supposed to do checks and balances. He's also shaking down TV stations to get money. So why are we trying to pretend as if it is out of the realm for this particular man to commit the crime that he committed on January 6th? And frankly, the only reason he ran for president was to make sure that he would not be prosecuted, because I fully believe that you would have put him under the jail based on our long-form conversation that we had.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Yeah. First of all, just a couple of comments. There are probably 10 people on this committee who have more conversations with 15 people on this committee who have more conversations with Donald Trump than myself. But anybody who says that Donald Trump thought he won that election, that is just plain not true. No way, unless he's the best actor in the history of this building.
We agree.
Did Donald Trump believe?
Order.
That Donald Trump did not believe he lost that election. Donald Trump did not believe he lost that election. But anybody who says that Donald Trump thought he won that election, that is just plain not true. No way. He just did. No way. And I think...
I want to ask you in my last few seconds, Mr. Smith, you're not the first special counsel to investigate Donald Trump. Special counsel Mueller, also of impeccable integrity, concluded that the 2016 Trump campaign welcomed foreign interference from Russia and used it to help them. Donald Trump has made it a litmus test to be hired in this administration to say that the 2020 election was fraudulent, even though, as you have established, it was not. Can you describe in a few seconds what your concerns are about the upcoming election?
I believe political litmus tests are not proper for career prosecutors. I think my experience over 30 years as a prosecutor in the Department of Justice is having people who are not guided by party allegiance, but guided by experience. That's how you can trust the criminal justice system. It's the same way with our election system.
And that quote, but for Mr. Trump's election and imminent return to the presidency, the office assessed that the admissible evidence was sufficient to obtain and sustain a conviction at trial. In other words, Donald Trump ran for president, like I said, so he wouldn't have to spend the rest of his life in prison. The chairman and other members of this committee have spent all day attacking you and trying to rewrite the history of January 6th. So let's talk about facts. Donald Trump lost to Joe Biden, yes or no?
That's correct.
Okay. In fact, 60 federal and state courts have found that there was no evidence of election fraud. Trump's own attorney general and vice president knew that he lost the election, but he still tried to steal the election by pressuring state officials, designing fake elector plans, nearly having Mike Pence hanged, and ultimately demanding that his supporters, quote, fight like hell, correct?
Correct.
We all saw what happened once they reached the U.S. Capitol. As your report outlines, President Trump knew that he would incite violence at the Capitol that day. In fact, some of Trump's senior advisors were pushing for violence. For example, page 81 of the report details how co-conspirators number 2, John Eastman, tried to convince Mike Pence to break the law, stating that, quote, violence was necessary. So it isn't just Trump who is responsible for the death of multiple law enforcement officers and the injuries of thousands of people. A lot of Republican members of Congress are also responsible. 147 Republicans voted to overturn the 2020 election results, including multiple members currently serving on this committee, and I will yield.